I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Brenda Carmichael's white Lexus pulling into my driveway on that humid August afternoon in Tallahassee, Florida. She had that particular expression on her face, the one that said she was about to ruin someone's day, and today that someone was me. My name is Victor Anderson, and I had lived in the Magnolia Springs community for about 3 years at that point. It was a decent neighborhood, mostly quiet folks who minded their own business. The houses were well maintained, the lawns were green, and the community pool actually stayed clean year-round. The only real problem was Brenda, our HOA president, who treated the homeowner association bylaws like they were handed down from Mount Sinai on stone tablets. I was in my garage, finishing up some work on my emergency preparedness setup. Living in Florida meant hurricanes were a fact of life, and after what happened during Hurricane Michael back in 2018, I had decided never to be caught unprepared again. I had installed a whole house generator 2 years ago, a beautiful Generac unit that could keep my home running for days. To fuel it properly, I had purchased 4 50-gallon drums of diesel fuel that I stored in my garage according to every fire code and safety regulation in the book. The drums were properly grounded, away from any ignition sources, and my garage had adequate ventilation. I had even hired a professional to inspect the setup and give me a written safety certification. Brenda stepped out of her car wearing a pristine white pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful, and her oversized sunglasses covered half her face. She was carrying a leather portfolio, which was never a good sign. "Victor," she called out, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Do you have a moment to discuss an urgent community matter?" I wiped my hands on a rag and walked to the edge of my garage. "What can I do for you, Brenda?" She pulled off her sunglasses with a dramatic flourish and looked past me into my garage. Her eyes locked onto my fuel storage drums, and I saw her mouth form into a thin line. "I received a complaint about those," she said, pointing at my drums like they were radioactive waste. "Those are fuel drums for my generator. Everything is up to code and completely legal." Legal or not, they are a violation of our HOA bylaws, specifically Section 12, subsection 4, which states that no homeowner shall store hazardous materials in quantities exceeding 5 gallons on their property. I felt my jaw clench. "I read those bylaws cover to cover when I bought this house, Brenda. There is no such section." She opened her portfolio and pulled out a stack of papers with a triumphant expression. "There is now. The board voted on amendments to the bylaws 2 weeks ago. We sent out notices to everyone via email. I never got any email. That is not our problem. Ignorance of the rules does not excuse violations." She thrust the papers toward me. "You have 72 hours to remove those drums from your property, or you will be fined $500 per day until you comply." I took the papers from her hand and scanned through them. Sure enough, buried in page 7 of what looked like hastily written amendments was the clause she mentioned. But something did not add up. You need a majority vote from all homeowners to amend the bylaws, not just the board. That is in our original charter. Brenda's smile never wavered, but I saw a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "We had a special meeting. The vote was legitimate." "How many people attended this special meeting?" "Enough to constitute a quorum." "How many, Brenda?" Her smile finally cracked. 7 homeowners, plus the 5 board members. I almost laughed. Our neighborhood had 143 homes. 12 people out of 143 is not a legitimate vote for bylaw amendments. "You know that, I know that, and when I bring this to a lawyer, they are definitely going to know that." The fake politeness dropped completely from her face. You can waste your money on lawyers if you want, Victor, but I am telling you right now that those drums need to go. They are dangerous, they are unsightly, and they are bringing down property values. They are in my garage. Nobody can even see them unless they are standing where you are right now on my property. I can see them. That is enough. She put her sunglasses back on. 72 hours, Victor. Do not make this difficult. She turned and walked back to her Lexus, her heels clicking on my concrete driveway. I watched her drive away, feeling that familiar mix of anger and frustration that came with every Brenda encounter. My wife Rachel had passed away from cancer 18 months earlier, and dealing with petty HOA drama was the last thing I wanted on my plate. But I also was not about to let Brenda bully me into removing safety equipment that could save my life during a hurricane. I went inside and immediately called my neighbor Tom, who had lived in Magnolia Springs for over a decade. Tom was a retired engineer, practical and level-headed, and he had zero patience for HOA nonsense. She did what? Tom said when I explained the situation. Basically created new bylaws in a secret meeting and is now trying to enforce them. That is absolutely not legal. You need to contest this, Victor. If you let her get away with this, she will do it to everyone. I plan to. I am calling a lawyer first thing tomorrow morning. Good. And for what it is worth, I have about 100 gallons of gasoline stored for my own generator. I would be happy to be the next person she comes after. We can make a class action out of it. I thanked Tom and spent the rest of the evening researching Florida HOA law. The more I read, the more confident I became that Brenda had overstepped her authority. HOA boards could not unilaterally change bylaws without a proper vote from the community. The fact that she had tried to sneak this through with barely any notice told me she knew exactly what she was doing and was hoping nobody would challenge her. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer named David Sheffield who specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in downtown Tallahassee, and he agreed to see me that afternoon. David was younger than I expected, probably in his mid-30s, with sharp eyes and an easy confidence. He listened to my story, reviewed the documents Brenda had given me, and then leaned back in his chair. "This is textbook HOA overreach," he said. "The bylaw amendment is not valid. Even if they had a quorum, which they did not, they are required to give 30 days notice before any vote on bylaw changes. 2 weeks via email does not cut it, especially when they cannot prove everyone received the email. So what do I do? First, do not remove those fuel drums. Second, do not pay any fines they try to levy. Third, let me send them a cease and desist letter explaining that their amendment is invalid, and any attempt to enforce it will result in legal action. Fourth, we need to call for a special meeting of all homeowners to address this and vote out Brenda and her cronies if possible." Can we really do that? Absolutely. If 10% of homeowners petition for a special meeting, the board has to hold one within 30 days. And if we can get enough people on board, we can vote to remove board members for misconduct. I left David's office feeling better than I had since Brenda showed up at my house. Over the next week, David sent the cease and desist letter, and I started talking to my neighbors about what was happening. The response was overwhelming. It turned out Brenda had been terrorizing people for years with petty violations and excessive fines. One family got fined because their mailbox was 2 inches shorter than the approved height. Another got cited because their Christmas lights were still up on December 27th. People were fed up, and my fuel drum situation became the catalyst for a neighborhood uprising. We got the signatures for a special meeting within 5 days. 53 homeowners signed on, way more than the required 10%. David filed the petition with the HOA board, and Brenda had no choice but to schedule the meeting. The meeting was set for September 15th, which gave us about 3 weeks to organize. During that time, Brenda tried everything she could to intimidate people into backing down. She sent threatening letters about additional fines. She showed up at people's houses to argue. She even tried to cancel the meeting by claiming the petition was invalid, but David shut that down immediately. I continued my normal routine during this time, going to my job as a systems analyst for the state government, maintaining my house, and making sure my generator and fuel storage stayed in perfect working order. Hurricane season was in full swing, and meteorologists were tracking several systems in the Atlantic. 2 days before the scheduled HOA meeting, things took an interesting turn. A tropical depression that had been meandering in the Caribbean suddenly strengthened into Tropical Storm Nicole. Within 24 hours, Nicole became Hurricane Nicole, a Category 3 monster headed straight for the Florida Panhandle. The projected path had it making landfall somewhere between Panama City and Tallahassee. Governor DeSantis declared a state of emergency, and everyone started preparing. The grocery stores were packed with people buying water and non-perishables. Gas stations had lines of cars waiting to fill up. Hardware stores sold out of plywood and generators in hours. I was already prepared, so I spent my time helping my elderly neighbors get ready. I helped board up windows, moved outdoor furniture into garages, and made sure everyone had flashlights and batteries. Tom and I created a neighborhood communication network so we could check on people after the storm passed. Brenda, I noticed, was in a full panic. I saw her at the grocery store loading up 3 shopping carts with supplies, her usual composure completely gone. She was snapping at the cashier and arguing with other customers over the last cases of water. It would have been funny if the situation had not been so serious. The HOA meeting was obviously canceled due to the hurricane. David called me to let me know we would reschedule for as soon as it was safe after the storm. Hurricane Nicole made landfall on September 14th at around 2 in the morning. The wind was incredible, howling like a freight train and rattling every window in my house. I stayed up all night monitoring the weather and checking my generator. The power went out around 3 a.m., and my Generac kicked on automatically within seconds. While the rest of the neighborhood went dark, my lights stayed on, my refrigerator kept running, and my air conditioning continued to work. The storm lasted for hours, finally moving inland around dawn. When it was over, Tallahassee looked like a war zone. Trees were down everywhere, blocking roads and crushing cars. Power lines were tangled in the debris. Roofs had been torn off houses. The damage was extensive. My house came through relatively unscathed. I had some missing shingles and my fence had a few broken panels, but overall I was lucky. More importantly, my generator performed perfectly, and I had enough fuel to run it for at least 2 weeks if necessary. The official word from the power company was that most of Tallahassee would be without electricity for 7 to 10 days, possibly longer in some areas. They had crews coming from other states to help with repairs, but the damage was so widespread that it was going to take time. I settled in for the long haul, rationing my fuel carefully and only running essential appliances. My neighborhood was completely dark at night except for my house, which made me a beacon for anyone who needed help. I let neighbors charge their phones at my place, kept my extra refrigerator available for people to store medication that needed to stay cold, and generally tried to be a good community member. On the 3rd day after the hurricane, Brenda showed up at my door. She looked terrible. Her hair was a mess. She was wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, and she had dark circles under her eyes. The put-together HOA president persona was completely gone. "Victor," she said, and her voice was actually shaking, "I need to talk to you about something important." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Come in." She stepped into my blissfully cool, well-lit house and looked around like she had entered a dream. "You still have power. Generator, I have been trying to tell you that emergency preparedness is important." She flinched at that but pushed forward. "My whole house is without power. My food has all spoiled. It is so hot I cannot sleep. I have 2 teenage daughters and they are miserable. I was wondering if you might have some fuel you could sell me. I have a generator too, but I ran out of gas already." There it was. The woman who had threatened to fine me $500 a day for storing fuel now wanted to buy that same fuel from me. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "You have a generator?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Yes, a smaller portable one. It runs on gasoline. I had about 10 gallons stored, but it only lasted a day and a half. I have been trying to find gas stations that are open, but the lines are hours long and most of them are sold out anyway." "That is rough. So can you sell me some fuel? I will pay you whatever you want." $200 for 5 gallons, 300. I let the silence hang for a moment. "Brenda, do you remember what you told me 3 weeks ago?" Her face fell. "Victor, please, I know we have had our disagreements, but this is an emergency. My daughters are suffering." My wife was suffering when she was dying of cancer. I was suffering when I lost her. And you know what I did? I prepared. I made sure that I would never be helpless in an emergency. I bought a generator, I bought fuel, and I did everything legally and safely, and you tried to take it away from me. I was just enforcing the bylaws. No, you were not. You made up bylaws in an illegal meeting and tried to bully me into compliance. If I had listened to you, I would be in the same situation you are in right now." Tears were forming in her eyes, and I could see real desperation there. Part of me wanted to help her. I was not a cruel person, and I did not like seeing anyone suffer, even Brenda. But another part of me knew that this was a teaching moment, not just for her, but for everyone who had let her get away with her petty tyranny for so long. "I cannot help you," I said. "You made it very clear that my fuel storage was dangerous and inappropriate. I would hate to compound that by actually distributing fuel to people. That seems even more dangerous, do not you think? You are really going to do this. You are going to let my family suffer because of some petty HOA dispute. I am not letting your family suffer. You are. You are the one who did not prepare. You are the one who tried to stop me from preparing. And you are the one who has to live with the consequences of your actions." She stared at me for a long moment, anger and desperation fighting for control of her expression. Finally, the anger won. "You are a selfish, terrible person, Victor Anderson. I hope you feel good about yourself." "I feel prepared. That is good enough for me." She stormed out of my house, slamming the door behind her. I watched through the window as she got into her car and drove away, the engine running rough because of the debris in the air filter. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood about what had happened. I got a call from Tom within an hour. "I heard Brenda came begging for fuel," he said, and I could hear the laughter in his voice. "She offered me $300 for 5 gallons of gasoline." "What did you tell her?" I told her no. "She made her bed, now she can lie in it." "Good for you. That woman has been a menace for too long. Maybe this will teach her some humility." I was not so sure about that, but I appreciated Tom's support. Over the next few days, the situation in Tallahassee grew more difficult. The heat was oppressive, with temperatures in the mid-90s and humidity that made it feel like you were breathing through a wet towel. People were getting desperate for power, for cold food, for air conditioning. Tempers were running short, and the police were dealing with an increase in domestic disturbances and petty crime. Brenda tried to go around me to other neighbors who had generators. Tom told her the same thing I did. So did Martha Patterson, who had solar panels and a battery backup system. So did Robert Chen, who had a propane generator. Everyone remembered how she had treated them over the years, and nobody was feeling charitable. On day 5 after the hurricane, I saw Brenda's husband Marcus outside their house, trying to set up a small camping stove to cook food. Marcus was a decent guy, a dentist who mostly stayed out of HOA business and let Brenda run things. I actually felt bad for him and their daughters. I walked over with a cooler full of ice and some cold drinks. "Hey, Marcus." He looked up, surprised. "Victor, I heard about what happened with Brenda." "Yeah, it was not a great conversation. I do not blame you for saying no. She brought this on herself." He took one of the cold sodas I offered and pressed it against his forehead. "God, this heat is killing me. How are your daughters holding up? They are tough kids. They will be fine." It is more the principle of the thing, you know. Brenda spent years telling everyone else how to live, and now we are paying the price. I am sorry you are caught in the middle of this. I am not. Maybe this will finally convince her that she does not have to control everything. He opened the soda and took a long drink. "The power company says it might be another week before they get to our street. I do not know if we can last that long. You are welcome to come over and use my place to cool off, charge phones, whatever you need." "My issue is with Brenda's behavior as HOA president, not with your family." Marcus looked genuinely touched. "That is really generous. I will talk to the girls. Thank you." I left him with the cooler and went back to my house. An hour later, Marcus came over with his 2 daughters, Emily and Sarah, who were 16 and 14. They looked exhausted and miserable, their faces red from the heat. "Come on in," I said. "Make yourselves comfortable." The girls practically ran to the air conditioning vents, standing directly under them and sighing with relief. Marcus laughed. "I think you just became their favorite person in the world." I set them up in my living room with cold drinks and snacks, let them charge their phones and tablets, and even fired up my TV so they could watch something mindless and entertaining. Marcus and I sat in the kitchen and talked about the storm damage and what the recovery was going to look like. "Where is Brenda?" I asked. "She went to stay with her sister in Georgia. The stress was getting to her, and she needed to get away. Plus her sister has power." That figured. Brenda had fled to comfort while her family stayed behind to deal with the consequences of her poor planning. Over the next week, Marcus and the girls became regular visitors to my house. I was happy to help them. They were good people who had been failed by someone who should have been looking out for them. My generator kept running smoothly, and my fuel levels stayed adequate because I was careful about what I ran and when. The power finally came back to our area on day 13 after the hurricane. When Marcus's house lights came on, Emily and Sarah actually cheered. They hugged me and thanked me profusely for helping them through the worst of it. "You saved our sanity," Sarah said. "Seriously, if I had to spend one more night sweating in the dark, I was going to lose it." Marcus shook my hand firmly. "I will not forget this, Victor. You showed my family more kindness than we deserved, given how Brenda treated you. You all deserved kindness regardless of what Brenda did. I hope you know that." After they left, I finally turned off my generator and let it cool down. It had performed flawlessly for 13 days straight, exactly as designed. My fuel drums were down to about 40% capacity, which was still plenty for the next emergency. Brenda came back from Georgia 2 days after the power returned. I saw her pull into her driveway with a car full of groceries and supplies, looking tanned and rested. Apparently her time at her sister's house had been a nice little vacation. The rescheduled HOA meeting was set for October 2nd, 2.5 weeks after the power came back. The community center, where we usually held meetings, had suffered roof damage during the hurricane, so we moved the meeting to a local church that had a large fellowship hall. The turnout was incredible. Over 100 homeowners showed up, filling every seat and lining the walls. People were angry and they were ready for change. David Sheffield was there with me, ready to provide legal guidance. Brenda called the meeting to order, but she had already lost control of the room. As soon as she tried to start with routine business, Tom stood up. "We are not here for routine business," he said, his voice carrying across the hall. "We are here to address serious misconduct by the HOA board, specifically relating to illegal bylaw amendments and abuse of power." Brenda tried to cut him off. "This is not the proper forum for—" "Yes, it is," David Sheffield said, standing up next to Tom. "This is exactly the proper forum. In fact, this is the only forum. So please sit down and let the homeowners speak." The room erupted in applause. Brenda looked shocked that she was being challenged so publicly, but she had no choice but to sit down. One by one, homeowners stood up and shared their stories of HOA abuse. The family who got fined for their mailbox height. The couple who were cited for having the wrong shade of white paint on their trim. The elderly man who was threatened with a lien on his house because his grass was a half-inch too tall due to a broken mower. The stories went on, painting a picture of an HOA board that had become drunk on petty power. When it was my turn, I stood and told the entire story of the fuel storage ban, Brenda's visit during the hurricane, and my refusal to sell her fuel. I saw her face turn red with anger and embarrassment. "The point is not that I refuse to help her," I said. "The point is that she tried to use fake bylaws to take away safety equipment that could have saved lives. If she had succeeded, I would have been just as helpless as she was during the hurricane, and that is not leadership. That is tyranny." The applause when I sat down was deafening. David took the floor next and explained in clear legal terms why the bylaw amendment was invalid, and how the board had violated multiple provisions of Florida HOA law. He also presented a petition signed by 78 homeowners calling for the immediate removal of Brenda Carmichael as HOA president, and a vote of no confidence in the entire board. Under Florida Statute 720.303, homeowners have the right to recall board members for cause, David said. The cause here is clear. The board acted outside their authority, attempted to enforce invalid rules, and showed a pattern of harassment toward homeowners. We are calling for a vote tonight. Brenda finally found her voice. This is a witch hunt. I have served this community faithfully for 6 years. I have kept property values high and maintained standards. Yes, I made a mistake with the bylaw vote, but that does not justify removing the entire board. It was not just a mistake, Martha Patterson said, standing up. It was a deliberate abuse of power. You knew that vote was not legitimate. You did it anyway because you thought nobody would challenge you. We should be thanking Victor, not condemning him, Robert Chen added. He helped people during the hurricane. He helped Marcus and his daughters when you ran away to Georgia. Where were you when your community needed you? That hit home. I saw people nodding and murmuring in agreement. Brenda had abandoned her post during a crisis while the very person she had targeted for persecution had stepped up. The vote was not even close. 102 homeowners voted to remove Brenda as HOA president. Only 4 voted to keep her, and 2 of those were other board members. The vote of no confidence in the full board passed by a similar margin. Brenda sat in her chair looking shell-shocked as the votes were tallied. When the final count was announced, she stood up slowly and walked to the front of the room. For a moment, I thought she might actually apologize or show some humility. Instead, she said, "You are all making a huge mistake. This neighborhood is going to fall apart without proper leadership. But fine, I am done. I quit." She grabbed her purse and walked out of the fellowship hall without another word. Two of the board members followed her, but the other two stayed and apologized to the community for their role in the mess. We spent the rest of the meeting electing a new board. Tom was voted in as president. Martha became vice president. Robert took over as treasurer. We elected two other homeowners to round out the 5-member board. Both of them reasonable people who promised transparency and common-sense governance. The first order of business for the new board was to formally invalidate the fuel storage ban and any other amendments that had been passed without a proper vote. They also established new procedures for board meetings, requiring full notice to all homeowners and public access to all records. I left that meeting feeling like a weight had been lifted. The little tyrant who had made life difficult for so many people was finally gone. More importantly, the community had come together and taken back control from a bully. It was democracy in action, messy but effective. Over the next few weeks, life in Magnolia Springs started to return to normal. The hurricane damage was gradually repaired. Trees were cut up and hauled away. Roofs were patched. The neighborhood began to look like itself again. Tom proved to be an excellent HOA president. He was fair, communicative, and focused on actual important issues like road maintenance and drainage improvements rather than the color of people's mailboxes. The difference in community morale was immediate and obvious. I ran into Marcus at the grocery store about a month after the big meeting. He pulled me aside with a serious expression. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Brenda and I are getting divorced." I was surprised but tried not to show it. "I am sorry to hear that. Do not be. It has been coming for a long time." The hurricane and everything that happened afterward just made it clear that we want different things in life. She wants control and status. I want peace and authenticity. The girls are relieved, honestly. They love their mom, but living with her was exhausting. How is she doing? She moved in with her sister permanently. I think she is looking at houses in that area. Fresh start and all that. He paused. For what it is worth, I do not think she will ever admit she was wrong, but I think she knows. Deep down, she knows that she pushed too far and that you were right. I did not do this to be right. I just wanted to be left alone to prepare for emergencies in a safe, legal way. I know. That is why everyone respects you. You were not on a power trip. You were just living your life. He clapped me on the shoulder. "Thank you again for helping my girls." They still talk about how cool it was to hang out at your house during the blackout. We said our goodbyes, and I finished my shopping. As I drove home, I thought about everything that had happened over the past 2 months. A hurricane, a community uprising, the fall of a petty tyrant, and a divorce. It had been quite a ride, but the most important thing, the thing that made it all worthwhile, was that my fuel drums were still in my garage, still legal, still safe, and still ready for the next emergency. Because in Florida, there was always a next emergency. Hurricane season ended without any more major storms hitting our area, though we watched several systems churn through the Caribbean. Each time a tropical depression formed, I checked my generator and my fuel levels. I was ready. In December, the new HOA board sent out a community newsletter highlighting the year's events and thanking everyone for their participation in making Magnolia Springs a better place to live. There was a specific section about emergency preparedness that made me smile. The recent hurricane season reminded us all of the importance of being prepared for emergencies. The HOA encourages all homeowners to maintain appropriate emergency supplies, including generators and fuel storage, in accordance with local fire codes and safety regulations. If you need guidance on how to safely store fuel or prepare your home for hurricanes, please contact Tom at the HOA office. We also want to recognize homeowners like Victor Anderson, who not only prepared themselves but also helped their neighbors during the extended power outage. That is what community is all about. Tom called me after the newsletter went out. "Too much?" he asked. "No, it is perfect. Maybe it will convince more people to prepare so we are not scrambling when the next big storm hits." That is the goal. I also wanted to let you know that we are organizing a community emergency response team. Would you be interested in helping? I agreed immediately. Over the next few months, we trained about 30 homeowners in basic emergency response procedures, first aid, and disaster preparedness. We created supply caches at strategic locations around the neighborhood and established communication protocols for when cell towers went down. We were building resilience into the community, making everyone safer. Life moved forward. I continued working my government job, maintaining my house and staying prepared. I dated a little bit, though nothing serious. Rachel's absence was still a presence in my life, but I was learning to live with the grief rather than being paralyzed by it. One evening in March, almost exactly a year after Brenda first showed up at my house about the fuel drums, I was working in my garage when I heard a car pull up. I looked out and saw a silver Honda Accord with Georgia plates. Brenda stepped out. She looked different. Her hair was shorter and a more natural blonde. She was dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse. The hard edges that had always defined her seemed softer somehow. She walked up to my garage with none of her old swagger, just a quiet determination. "Victor," she said, "I know I am probably the last person you want to see right now, but I was in town visiting the girls, and I wanted to talk to you." "Okay," I said warily. "I owe you an apology. A real one, not the fake kind I would have given back when I was still trying to save face." She took a breath. "I was wrong. About the fuel drums, about the bylaw amendment, about how I treated you and everyone else in this neighborhood. I was so focused on control and image that I lost sight of what actually mattered. And when the hurricane came and I did not have power and you did, I was furious. Not at the situation, but at you for being right, for proving that my priorities were all wrong." I did not say anything, just let her continue. "The last year has been humbling. The divorce, the move, losing my position in the community. I had to take a long, hard look at myself, and I did not like what I saw. I joined a therapy group, started working on my control issues. I am trying to be better." She met my eyes. "I know saying sorry does not fix what I did, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. You were not my enemy. You were just a guy trying to live his life safely, and I tried to stop you because it did not fit my vision of how things should be." That was wrong. It was probably the most honest thing I had ever heard Brenda say. I could tell it cost her something to come here and admit all of this. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "It takes courage to own up to mistakes, especially big ones. Marcus told me how you helped Emily and Sarah during the blackout, that you let them come over every day to cool off and charge their stuff. You did not have to do that after how I treated you. They are good kids. They did not deserve to suffer because of decisions you and I made." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "That is the difference between you and me. You think about other people. I only thought about myself and my rules." She wiped at her eyes. "Anyway, I just wanted to say that. I will let you get back to whatever you were doing." She turned to leave, but I stopped her. "Brenda, For what it is worth, I hope things work out for you in Georgia. I hope you find whatever it is you are looking for." She gave me a small, sad smile. "Thank you. That means more than you know." I watched her drive away, and I realized that I did not feel angry anymore. I felt something closer to pity mixed with respect. It takes strength to face your own failures and try to change. Brenda had been a terrible HOA president and a bully, but maybe she could become a better person. I hoped so, anyway. Spring turned to summer, and hurricane season rolled around again. I did my usual preparations, checked my generator, topped off my fuel drums, and made sure my emergency supplies were fresh. The community was much better prepared this year thanks to the emergency response team. We had regular drills and everyone knew what to do when a storm threatened. We got lucky that year. A few tropical storms passed nearby, but nothing major hit Tallahassee. The generator sat idle and my fuel stayed in the drums. That was fine with me. Being prepared was not about hoping to use your emergency equipment. It was about having peace of mind knowing you could survive when things went wrong. Tom and the HOA board continued to do excellent work. Property values in Magnolia Springs actually increased, partly because word got around that we had professional, reasonable leadership instead of a tyrant. New families moved in, and the community thrived. I eventually started dating a woman named Andrea Reynolds who worked as a nurse at the hospital. She was kind, practical, and had her own experiences with loss, having lost her husband to a car accident 3 years earlier. We understood each other in ways that people who had not been through tragedy could not quite grasp. It was not a whirlwind romance, more like two people carefully finding their way toward each other, but it felt right. Andrea was impressed by my emergency preparedness setup. "You are like the most responsible person I have ever met," she said when I showed her my generator and fuel storage. "Most guys would just hope for the best and wing it." "I tried winging it once. Never again," she laughed. "I like that about you. You learn from experience." We took things slow, but by the following winter, she had moved into my house. We combined our emergency supplies and doubled our preparedness level. Andrea being a nurse meant she brought serious medical supplies and knowledge to our setup. Together, we were practically a self-sufficient unit. One Saturday morning, we were having coffee on the back patio when Tom came over with his wife Linda. They had news. "We are moving," Tom said. "Linda's mother in Oregon is having health issues, and we need to be closer to help take care of her." "I am sorry to hear about her mother, but I am going to miss having you as HOA president," I said. "That is actually why I am here. The board needs to fill my position until the next regular election, and we want to nominate you." I almost spit out my coffee. "Me? I do not want to be HOA president." "Nobody wants to be HOA president," Tom said with a grin. "But you would be good at it. You are fair, you are reasonable, and everyone respects you after how you handled the whole Brenda situation." "I do not know, Tom. That is a lot of responsibility." Andrea put her hand on my arm. "You would be great at it, and you would not let the power go to your head like Brenda did." "That is the key," Linda said. "We need someone who sees it as service, not status. That is you." I thought about it for a long moment. The truth was, I had enjoyed working on the emergency response team and helping to build a better community. Maybe this was a natural extension of that work. "Okay," I said finally, "but only until the next election. I am not looking to make a career out of this." "Fair enough," Tom said. The board voted me in as interim president the following week. My first official act was to organize a community workday to help repair some of the common areas that had been neglected. Over 50 people showed up, and we got more done in one Saturday than Brenda's board had accomplished in a year. My second act was to create a community fund specifically for helping homeowners who could not afford emergency preparedness equipment. We raised money through yard sales and small fundraisers, then used it to buy basic generators, emergency supplies, and fuel storage for elderly residents and families on tight budgets. The fund was named the Hurricane Preparedness Initiative, and it became one of the most popular programs in Magnolia Springs history. Serving as HOA president gave me a new appreciation for how important good governance was at every level. It was not about control or power. It was about making life better for everyone, creating systems that worked, and treating people with respect and fairness. Those principles applied whether you were running a neighborhood association or a country. When the regular election came around 6 months later, people asked me to run for a full term. I declined. I had done what I set out to do, and it was time to let someone else take the reins. A woman named Jennifer Morrison won the election. She was a project manager for a tech company, incredibly organized, and had a great vision for the community. I was happy to hand things over to her. Andrea and I got married in a small ceremony at the community center 2 years after we started dating. Marcus and his daughters came. Tom and Linda flew in from Oregon. Half the neighborhood showed up to celebrate with us. It was a beautiful day, made more meaningful by the journey that had brought us to that point. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. I kept working my government job. Andrea continued nursing. We maintained our preparedness setup and helped neighbors with theirs. The community continued to thrive under good leadership. Hurricane seasons came and went, some worse than others, but Magnolia Springs was always ready. I never forgot the lesson from that first confrontation with Brenda about my fuel drums. People in power, whether it was an HOA president or anyone else, had to be held accountable. Rules had to make sense and be applied fairly. Bullies had to be stood up to, even when it was uncomfortable. And being prepared, truly prepared, for life's emergencies was not paranoid or excessive. It was responsible. Every time I walked into my garage and saw those fuel drums sitting exactly where they had always been, properly maintained and ready for the next crisis, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Not because I had won some petty battle with an HOA president, but because I had stood up for what was right and helped create a better community in the process. Brenda had tried to ban my generator fuel storage. When the hurricane came and the power went out, she had run out of gas and begged me to sell her some of mine. I had refused, not out of cruelty, but because some lessons need to be learned the hard way. That refusal had sparked a chain of events that transformed an entire neighborhood, removed a tyrant from power, and ultimately made everyone safer and better prepared for the next disaster. Years later, I would occasionally wonder what happened to Brenda in Georgia. I hope she found peace and became the better person she seemed to be trying to become when she came to apologize. People could change, even people who had been as difficult as she was. I chose to believe that was possible, but I also knew that vigilance was important. There would always be people who wanted power for the wrong reasons, who confused rules with righteousness, who thought control was the same as leadership. It was up to the rest of us to keep those people in check, to demand accountability, and to build systems that served everyone rather than just the people in charge. That was the real story behind the fuel drums and the hurricane and the HOA drama. It was not about me versus Brenda. It was about a community finding its voice and taking back control from someone who had abused their position. It was about the importance of preparation, both for natural disasters and for dealing with human ones. And it was about the simple truth that sometimes the best thing you can do is stand your ground, maintain your principles, and let the consequences sort themselves out. I had refused to let Brenda bully me into removing legitimate safety equipment. I had refused to bail her out when her poor planning caught up with her. Those refusals had felt harsh at the time, but they had been necessary. Because, in the end, enabling bad behavior just leads to more bad behavior. Rescuing people from the consequences of their own actions prevents them from learning and growing. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone experience the full weight of their mistakes. Andrea and I celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary by taking a cruise to the Caribbean. As we sailed past the same waters where hurricanes formed every year, I thought about how much my life had changed. Since that day, Brenda showed up at my house with her leather portfolio and her fake bylaws. I had lost my wife to cancer. I had battled an HOA president. I had survived a major hurricane. I had helped rebuild a community. I had found love again. I had served as a leader, however briefly. Through it all, those fuel drums in my garage had been a constant, a symbol of preparation and self-sufficiency that had proven its value time and time again. When we got back from the cruise, the first thing I did was check on my generator and fuel storage. Everything was exactly as it should be, maintained and ready. Hurricane season was starting up again, and the meteorologists were predicting an active year. But I was not worried. I was prepared. And that, more than anything else that had happened in the years since Brenda tried to ban my emergency equipment, was what mattered. Not revenge, not victory, not even vindication. Just the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can take care of yourself and help others when disaster strikes. The fuel drums stayed where they had always been, in my garage, legal and safe and full. Brenda was gone. The old HOA board was gone. The drama was over, but the preparation remained because that was what responsible people did. They prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. They stood up to bullies. They helped their neighbors. They built community, and when the next hurricane came, as it inevitably would, I would be ready. My generator would fire up, my lights would stay on, and anyone who needed help would find it at my door. Not because I was a hero or wanted recognition, but because being prepared and helping others was simply the right thing to do. That was the lesson Brenda never learned during her time as HOA president. Power was not about control. It was about service. Leadership was not about enforcing arbitrary rules. It was about making things better for everyone. An emergency preparedness was not just about saving yourself. It was about being strong enough to help others when they were weak. I learned all of that from a simple dispute about fuel storage, a hurricane, and a refusal to sell gas to someone who had tried to take away my ability to prepare. It was a complicated, messy, very human story. But in the end, it had a simple moral: be prepared, stand your ground, help others. Build community. And never let bullies win. Those principles had served me well through everything life had thrown at me, and I suspected they would continue to serve me well for whatever came next. Because there was always a next challenge, a next storm, a next battle. The key was being ready for it, whatever form it took, and I was ready. I would always be ready. The fuel drums in my garage made sure of that.